Death is the lens through which all things become clear. It's the great teacher. I think that grief oftentimes is really just an ambush of forgetting and remembering.
Everything's impermanent, and I think that is the beauty of life, the fact that it is impermanent. The fact that it is impermanent makes every moment more special.
There's a different kind of chosen finality to that kind of loss that hurts, and perhaps in a deeper way.
And that's the key word, I think, chosen. Thank you for coming here, Davide.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is cool. So for anyone, I'm sure a lot of people are going to know who you are. For anyone that don't, I remember I didn't know if you had experience with loss, and I just think everything you talk about is provocative, it's wise, it's funny, and you talk about such a vast variety of just real life shit for the most part. And from my understanding, and I just thought you'd be a fun conversation, so that's why I have you across from me right now.
No, I'm glad to be here.
Another Jersey boy and Italian as well, so that helps. But before we started, you did bring up a quote that I guess resonates with your audiobook and what you're working on, how there was some relationship to loss in what you were doing. But what was the quote with Emerson you mentioned?
Well, just to work backwards first, the book itself is called The Letters I Never Sent, and it's a novel. It's a novel that tracks a character's memory of people that he's had relationships with, in large part romantic relationships, and all of whom he's lost along the way. And in that memory, there's also a grief, but there's also a healing, and it really reminds me of the quote that you were just mentioning from Emerson, which is that of all the ways to lose a person, death is the kindest, which is provocative for those who've suffered the loss of a loved one through death. And of course, Emerson is not downplaying the significance of that grief, but he's saying something different, which is that when someone dies, there isn't that same sense of rejection or abandonment or betrayal, typically anyway. There could be circumstances where that comes into play, but typically there's an innocence to it. Whereas when someone chooses to reject you, when someone you've loved chooses to deny you, abandon you, to do the rest of life without you, the awareness of that loss and the awareness of that person's continuing life outside of your life hits different. Mm-hmm. I think is what Emerson is saying. And just to a large extent, I would agree. I think that there's a different kind of chosen finality to that kind of loss that hurts in a different and perhaps in a deeper way.
And that's the key word, I think, chosen.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because I think it's important that you did shed light on the fact that some people might be like, what do you mean kind? Like, nothing's kind about this. This sucks. I lost my dad, this, that, and the other. But I think also you kind of got to go dig it a little deeper beyond just the obvious words and comparing the two, because there is a difference in the story that I just mentioned before we, I guess, technically just started the episode. It's about the idea of my last relationship, and that year process, I realized I was grieving. Right. And a lot of the conversation in this show is the biological loss of grief, but I've had a cast a wider net of just grief in general. Yeah. And I agree. I think it is a kinder, as painful as kind can be in this scenario, the idea that you're grieving someone who's still alive, whether it's abandonment or relationships, is way more painful. Not way more painful, I shouldn't say that. Is a different type of pain because, I can still see this person, but I have to live a life without them. Yeah. And that's the convoluted aspect of it.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that viewpoint. I do, and I think that it depends how you define death anyway, because the loss of a person is a little death in life, and I think that throughout life we suffer these little deaths all the time, whether it be the loss of a person physically, whether it be the destruction of a memory. Because sometimes you have a really fond memory of someone, and then they do something that kills that memory.
Oh, interesting.
And so we suffer little deaths throughout life all the time. I understand, of course, that there's a finality to physical death that feels stronger. But I don't think it matters really in how you experience the grief. you can't console someone who's grieving abandonment or rejection or the end of a relationship by telling them, well, well, at least they're still alive. Like it's not a consolation that they're not in fact dead.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, again, just echoing what Emerson is trying to suggest, is that it doesn't quite matter whether they've actually died or not. Grief is grief.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that grief oftentimes is really just an ambush of forgetting and remembering.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you what I mean by that. There's this poem that I love by William Wordsworth, and he wrote it following the death of his young daughter, Catherine. So he suffered a tremendous loss when a child dies before a parent. There's something unnatural about that. And he writes this poem, and in it he's describing how he's having a moment of joy. You see a sunset, you hear a beautiful song, you have a great night out with friends, and in that moment of joy, you want to share this story with somebody. You want to share it with that person, and you turn in your mind to share it, and then in that moment you remember that they're gone. And so the poem is called Surprised by Joy, and just the first few lines, he says, surprised by joy, impatient as the wind, I turn to share the transport. Oh, with whom but thee, long buried in the silent tomb. And that poem has always stuck with me because it was taught to me by my favorite professor. And interestingly enough, I guess, or perhaps ironically, I was at his funeral a couple of weeks ago.
No way.
Yeah, so he was Father McCarty. I went to a Jesuit university, and so many of the professors were priests. And the Jesuit priests are special. I mean, they're the great academics and the great intellectuals of the Catholic Church. And he was a literature professor. He always wore plaid. He didn't dress like a priest to class. And I went to his funeral because he was my favorite professor, and I was a literature major, and that's why I love reading and writing now. And he was the kind of professor that would always have the students read the poem out loud rather than him reading it. And he would always stop them after the first line. And that just stuck with me. So it was surprised by joy, impatient as the wind, I turned to share the chance. Oh, do something. Read it again. Like he loved the poetry so much that he would want to hear it again after the first line. And I went to his funeral, and I have to say it was an incredible experience. I went to the wake rather, so the day before the funeral, and it was at Fordham in the Bronx, because he was living in what is essentially the retirement home for the Jesuit priests. And the first thing that struck me was that I was the only person there that was not a priest. And I was the only person there under the age of 60. And I was sad to see that, because it occurred to me that no one showed up. That he was a beloved professor. Now people have lives and things to do, and probably for the most part, people never even heard of the news. I was fortunate that a former classmate reached out to me to tell me. But there was something incredible about the wake, because I felt like I was witnessing almost a ceremony of a secret society, because I felt like I was just there with priests, saying farewell to a fellow priest. I felt like I was with the knights, at the round table, and I was just in the background. I sat in the back. I don't want to disturb. And he was just an incredible man. But what that poem always stuck with me because of how he taught it. And at the same time, seeing that no one was there reminded me of the other side of death, which so often is the forgetfulness that comes with it. The way people are forgotten, and we don't really consider that while we're living. I think if we thought too much about death as we lived, it would be a paralyzing experience. Like you can't just go around your day constantly thinking about death,
Right.
And the oblivion that comes with it, the forgetfulness of it, the fact that you are, within a generation or two, pretty much forgotten. I mean, this is, again, this is painful to say, but it's real, right? How much do you really know about your great grandfather?
Right.
Maybe the name, I'm sure there's people there that, this is terrible to think, don't know the names of their great grandparents. And so think about that. And when you think about that, I think it's in part terrifying, but
Yes.
also humbling. I think it's also humbling. And so again, just another story, if I could.
Please.
Another literary story. There was another professor, Dr. Walsh, um, who was teaching to us the death of Ivan Ilyich. It's this novella by Leo Tolstoy, and it deals with this character Ivan, who is facing on his deathbed how poorly he has lived his life, how little he has loved well, how little he has loved authentically, how he was just worried about making money and social status and all these things. And now he's on his deathbed and he's realizing that it's all been meaningless. And I remember, the reason why I remember, again, Dr. Walsh, I have these great memories of these professors. He was reading the closing paragraphs to us in class. He was reading it aloud. And as he was getting closer and closer to the end, his voice was gradually dropping and dropping and dropping to the point where by the end, he was reading it to himself. And I'll never forget that moment. It's just, he was so deeply moved by this. He probably has some connection to it. Maybe he was thinking of his father. Maybe he was thinking of his own life. But the point of the novella is, and the reason why it is so impactful, to the point that a professor forgot that he was reading it aloud and he was almost in tears, I could sense. The point of it is that death, when we are meeting it, when we are facing it, um, really puts a lens on how we've lived. And so, to round out the point, while we can't think of death all day long, because it would be so excruciating and debilitating, I think, though at the same time, when we do think of death, it humbles us. It hopefully causes us to examine our life and ensure that we're living well and doing good and loving as we should. So that's, I guess, the challenge that death throws at us when we face it. It says your time is coming up, is coming.
And I think the key thing you said there, from my interpretation of everything, is the examining. And I think I agree. I talk about death. Obviously, this is what I'm doing, but it's not, I don't want to say it's like staring at the sun where you want to take a glance at it, but I think it is important to consider death for that contemplation of examining the life lived. So I do find importance in everything that I'm doing, and it's helped me live a better life, or at least feel like I'm living a better life, is because of the contemplation of death. And I think there is a spectrum to that. Yeah, if I'm constantly thinking of death, I might get paranoid, it's overwhelming and it's too much. But because of the idea that this is all going to end, it does make you re-examine the way I'm living now. And there are those people that, when you get closer to death, start that process then, because now death is in their face and they're forced to face it.
Yeah.
But then you lived all this life without that examining, and it starts making you not second guess, but really just think about the life lived. That's why I think it is important to contemplate it now.
Yeah.
And that's the humbling aspect of what you said about death, but it is also scary. And then the idea of forgetfulness, and you also mentioned the word meaningless. I'm kind of going on a rant of trying to capture everything you just said, because that was my first thought. When you think about the forgetfulness of past ancestors and this or that, the forgetfulness kind of does tie into the word meaningless for me, because then I don't think it's meaningless, but initially I'm like, wait, if we are just gonna be forgotten, how meaningful is our life if it's just to be forgotten by the next generation? But then at the same time, it makes it more meaningful for me to make the most of the life. So it's kind of a tit for tat. Yeah, it kind of seems meaningless if we're just gonna be forgotten, but it also makes me want to make the life more meaningful because we're might be forgotten. Does that make sense?
100%.
It all comes from death.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think that the finality of death, um, and the fact that you only get one ride on this merry-go-round, as my father always says, I think should not lead us to a place of, like, existential dread, but rather should push us to live a full life. I mean, and that's why Albert Camus, when he's describing Sisyphus, who was this ancient myth that as a punishment for what he had done towards the gods. This is a Greek mythology. He was punished to eternally roll a stone up a hill, only to then watch it roll back down, and then you have to do it all over again. And this, of course, is a metaphor for the meaninglessness of life, that we're toiling and striving and working, and it doesn't matter because it's just a constant cycle. But Camus comes to the conclusion that we should actually consider Sisyphus happy, because he's finding meaning in the so-called meaninglessness. That even if life is meaningless, though I don't agree with that, because I come from a Christian perspective, but even within that understanding of life, the purpose is still there, which is the purpose is still to make the most of your time and to strive and to be present. So I think no matter how you turn it, whether you have a very meaningless, purposeless, existentialist view of death and life, or whether you're a Christian who, I don't believe that death is the end for us, and I don't believe that life is meaningless. Um, you nevertheless come to the same conclusion, which is that life is meant to be lived intentionally. Live life seriously is, I think, the point. Even these two completely competing and seemingly opposing philosophies, they still come to the same conclusion. And in fact, that's why I think that all great writers, no matter what time or place or race or orientation, which I think are the least interesting things about us. The most boring things about a person is where they're from and what color their skin is. What unites all those writers from across millennia, and whether they grew up in Harlem or in 16th century England, is that they all see death as the lens through which we understand life. Death is the lens through which all things become clear. It's the great teacher, because of exactly what we're describing. Again, even whether it's the Christian viewpoint or the seemingly opposite viewpoint, they still come to the conclusion that death teaches us something in life. And what it should teach us is to live fully.
And at the same time, I agree. I just wonder the people that see death, that don't see it as a teacher, and they're just see it as misery and unfairness and this, that, and the other. To find the lesson, or to understand there is a lesson, is a choice.
Yeah.
Do you see it like that too, in a sense that at what point do we try to find the lesson? Because, there's certain times when you're in the middle of grief, or just, I don't think that's the time to really immediately try to find a lesson in it. You got to kind of give it time. But some people never see, I'm not saying for better or for worse, I'm not saying that's the right or wrong approach. I have a different approach, but at the same time, it becomes a point of making a choice to see a lesson. Because even if death is trying to scream at you all these lessons in life and be grateful, yada, 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 if we don't choose to see it that way, or choose to find the meaning from it, then there's no lesson.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, I think there's just also a reality that we can't escape. Everyone is going to suffer loss. Everyone is going to die. So you can shake your fist at the sky forever. It doesn't change the reality that there is nothing unique about death. It is the one thing that we all absolutely do. It's the great equalizer. It's the great unifier. So you can, that doesn't, of course, alleviate the sense of grief, but to see it as something unfair, or to see it as an injustice, is unhuman. I mean, it is in fact what we are here to ultimately do. We expire one way or another, and so it's not a question so much of is it right or wrong, or is there meaning or not meaning, but I think it's what you said, which is choosing to discover it. The reality is that this is how life goes. And so it's just a question of coming to the choice to find meaning in the grief.
Yeah, and even from my personal experience, losing my dad when I was 12, right outside where we are right now in New York, I maybe I did. I'm just forgetting it in regards to my processing of it as a young boy. I I never really felt or recall feeling like a victim,
Hmm.
and the idea, oh, how could this happen to me, let alone 3,000 other people on 9/11, and my dad was taken. It was just I've said this before, but I've had this thought process. Maybe in one of the main lessons that I've learned was, oh, okay, I can lose my dad at 12 years old, or loved ones can die in a blink of an eye, in which he did. It could happen in this way, as violent as September 11th took place. So combining those two at a young age, I kind of just made this subconscious thought of, no, this happens, and the fact that it happened with 3,000 other people, I was like, okay, so I'm not the only one,
Hmm.
and this shit just happens as like as plainly stated as possible. It taught me the lesson. I don't find it unfair. If anything, it's fair because it's unfair. If
Hmm.
that makes a
Yeah.
contradicting point at all, it's like maybe the fact that it feels unfair for everyone in some capacity, that it is fair. And also,
Hmm.
who told me life was supposed to be quote unquote fair anyway?
Yeah.
I didn't sign up for anything, a contract, being born into this world. Like, by the way, it's going to be a fair life. And then someone broke that promise. No,
Hmm.
it's just, it seems insensitive. But through my own experience at that young age, I just realized, no, we die. It could happen at any moment, and it's up to me to choose to make meaning of it in any direction that I want, or choose not to make meaning of it. And to me, the meaning was the gratefulness, as psychotic as that sounds sometimes, of being aware of what's still here, being aware that it's all going to disappear, everything's impermanent. And I think that is the beauty of life, the fact that it
Yeah.
is impermanent.
Yeah.
As terrifying, as painful as that is, the fact that it is impermanent makes every moment more special,
100%.
even with the pain, because life to me is just dabbling in uh, grief and joy at the same time, sometimes simultaneously, and going this ebbs and flow of life, and it's just part of it. And how we're going to make meaning of it is I think where accountability steps in. There's some level of accountability. Yeah, I can't control the events, but I can't control how I see it. And I think ultimately what we're talking about is, how do we see it? How do we see these life experiences? How do we see death as a theory or as a concept or as whatever you want to call it? And it always comes back to the perspective in which you see things. And I think that's the creating the reality right in front of us.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think that loss is a tremendous opportunity.
Yes.
It's a tremendous opportunity for wisdom, for growth, for expanding yourself and the things that matter, and realizing what matters and what doesn't matter so much. Um, but also, I think it's an opportunity to connect with something greater,
Mm-hmm.
because in the Bible it says that God is close to the brokenhearted, which is to say that when you're brokenhearted, when you're grieving, when you're feeling a loss, you're closer to God in that moment. So you have an opportunity for greater connectivity. Um, and, again, these things maybe don't seem like much of a consolation in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But when you consider, as you did, that all people will ultimately suffer this loss, um, th- it's not a question of fairness or unfairness. We are all equally touched by this in life. We all will end. We all will die. If you can just get beyond that, and I think people generally eventually do, they eventually do overcome the initial pangs of grief. You discover that it is an opportunity to grow as a person, to grow spiritually, even. Um, and I think also it does matter how you face death. What it is that you believe in matters, and you can't teach belief. Belief just uh, is there or it isn't. But I have the consolation that I believe in the power of the resurrection. So I believe in eternal life. I believe that there's something after death, and so through that lens, do we still nevertheless grieve the passing of a loved one, but there is this there is this understanding in my faith, that there is victory in death, in that God has overcome death for us, and it doesn't end here. So that, of course, is my faith. I can't prove it to anybody,
Mhm.
but in that there's a great consolation, and I think that people of faith, and you can have faith in different things, but I have observed that people of faith deal with death differently.
100%. I mean, I've spoken to people that have come from Christian backgrounds, more agnostic or atheists, and I've seen atheists find meaning in the fact that they're not set on a continuation of some form, and they find meaning in that. So I think again, it comes back to that perspective. But I do believe in what you're saying, that there is a real opportunity when it comes to death, and it's not important to rush when you may or may not find that. Because it's for me now, when I go through these tough experiences, like when I almost lost my mom in 2023, I was, for better or for worse, for me, I was in the moment finding these immediate lessons, maybe because of my past experiences with my
Yeah.
family, even though this is a different experience. I, in that moment, was able to presently understand the immediate lessons. I'm not saying that's a practical approach for most situations in general. Maybe I'm a lunatic, but I was able to see that. And I do believe the opportunity is revealed if we allow it. And I spoke to, I think this episode, timing wise, may come out after this, but I spoke to Kelly Carlin, who is the daughter of, comedy legend George
Oh
Carlin.
yeah.
And we had this conversation that I think relates to what we're saying, where the opportunity is. I feel like when you go through a deep grief or any tough experience, you kind of get stripped away. You get broken down, and you may, philosophically have a death of your own,
Yeah.
like an ego death or something like that. And then you have to then we have the opportunity to put ourselves together. And so, like, all the parts that made us to where we were before that big event, if you will, breaks us down. All the pieces are scattered. And then we have the opportunity to rebuild ourselves, either with new pieces, with some of the same pieces, and you start almost reprioritizing what matters through a new lens from death, because death to me just made me realize what's important.
Mhm.
It trimmed the fat, if you will. Like, I realized, okay, this Instagram post doesn't mean shit. It's my mom. It's the compassion. It's the way I treat others. It's the service. Okay, so I'm going to leave those parts that were making up the paradigm that is me. I don't need to rebuild with that. Now I'm getting the opportunity to rebuild what makes me, how I see this life. And again, that all came from falling apart. It all came from, maybe what you're saying is, those in pain or in grief might be closer to God. And I feel like that's my analogy, because now I'm closer to the purest form of me and understanding what really fucking matters. And
Yeah.
there's this opportunity to rebuild, but that rebuilding process sucks. It's fucking hard. It's facing pain. It's going through the pain, but it's that perseverance, living life through the pain, and this opportunity of lessons and reprioritizing what matters. And again, that all comes from this new lens of contemplating death and examining your life, all due to death. And that
Yeah.
is the power of death, as scary and unknown as it can be. But and to bring it back to what you were saying, I do feel and found people that have some sort of faith navigate it differently. Whether differently is better, that's up to, I guess it's relative to each person. But I think what we believe kind of parlays with how we perceive.
Mm.
And I think the belief is partially perception. But it does make a difference of, if you believe we continue on, then that's kind of relieving. And it does, if I understand that my dad's gone and believe that I'm going to see him again, or continuation, that doesn't remove all the pain
No.
of that material love and feeling that we might get of physicality. But at the same time, if I believe we continue on, then to me, it's, I could take a breath. And that's based on the belief.
Yeah. Well, it's of course it doesn't. I don't think it alleviates the pain that you feel here and now in the flesh. I think no one is exempt from the uh, the difficulties of life.
No.
Even with all the faith in the world, you still go through life and you suffer. But there's a hope that comes with that. A hope of being reunited, of the person not really being dead,
Mm-hmm.
in their most real form. Their soul is alive, and this is just the earthly flesh, the earthly covering that we shed. That faith, of course, provides, I think, some relief, and most of all, hope. I can't imagine living in the world, without that. thinking that this is all there is to it. I think it would be difficult for me. So I think faith is easy for me. For some people, faith is so hard. For me, faith is easy because the other way seems hard.
And is that a choice in regards to, because some people really that are more maybe objective want quote unquote proof, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
So is your choice to have the faith more just like the other option just seems shittier, or is it something deeper than that in regard? Because that's I agree with that.
Yeah.
I can see
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
right. There's no right. I'm not saying one way is wrong or right, but at the same time, it kind of sounds like your belief is more of a choice of this option just seems better.
Well, to some extent, that may be true, and I think it's also okay to acknowledge that. I think sometimes a person of faith, a Christian, may try to oppose that argument. And what I would say is actually that that's completely biblical. I mean, there's one of my favorite stories because it's such a human story in the Bible. Is there's a man who says to Jesus, uh, "Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief." And it seems like a paradox. Well, hold on a second. How do you believe, but you're still asking him to help you with your unbelief? And the reality is that all of us believe and don't believe at the same time. And anyone who's walking around saying, "No, I have no moments of doubt. I know exactly what happens when my life is over, and I know exactly where I'm going, and I have 100% faith." It's not only untrue, but it's not even biblical to the extent that you're a Bible following person. The reality is that um, what that man is saying to God is, I'm choosing to believe. I want to believe. So help me have faith. And so my experience for myself is the same, which is that I don't really know. And I guess I'm making the choice of believing what sounds better to me. And I'm asking along the way for the help in continuing to believe, even when it seems like I might be wrong. But help me believe because I'm having a moment of doubt. I think that inherent to a life of faith, that there is something after death, something good after death, is moments where you have doubt,
Yeah,
but you're choosing to have faith, and you're choosing and you're asking for help to support that faith.
yeah, and that really lines up with just navigating life in general. Because you think about how many times has anyone listening or us been in a situation that just feels dire, and you're only understanding how you feel now and going to think this painful now is our forever. But then we have a choice to believe that I will navigate through this. I don't know what's on the other side. I know it's not going to be the same, but I will have faith that I can persevere through this. And then while having that faith, you're going to have the unbelief at the same
Yeah.
time, but it's still the perseverance of having faith through like the moments we live in life outside of the idea of afterlife. I'm just saying that theory that you're explaining trickles down to the way we have faith of trying to get through anything in life.
Yeah. In fact, like we said, like we've been saying from the start, which is that death is a great teacher. And one of the things that I think that we can see in life, in all of the little deaths in life, um, is how we always get past it, even when we think we can't. So, how many times have you gone through a terrible breakup, and in the moment you thought,
Mm-hmm.
"I'm never gonna get past this." I mean, you feel sick. You feel physically sick because when you grieve, you physically get sick. Like there's a there's a line in Love in the Time of Cholera, where um, the protagonist is grieving for love, and also there's a cholera outbreak in the country, and the doctor says, "Well, the symptoms of love can mimic those of cholera." So I think that what we've learned though is every single time life goes on, and a situation that seemed like it was insurmountable, um, that it was the end for us, turned out to be an opportunity and turned out to not be the end. And then you look back, and sometimes you most of the time you think you're probably better off that it worked out that way.
The first one, you're making me feel like I need to read more. Second, it was this
No,
conversation I had with my buddy. It was kind of aligned with this. Are you familiar with the Chinese farmer?
no.
So I'll butcher this story for you, and then you can read it better online or something. But it was something along the lines of a boy and his Chinese farmer and his son were, I guess, around their farm, and a beautiful stallion comes upon them, and then the neighbors see they get this beautiful stallion. Like, oh my God, you're so lucky that this horse just showed up, and now look, you have a wonderful stallion by your side for nothing. And the Chinese farmer goes, maybe, or we'll see. Then all of a sudden, the son is learning to tame the horse and ride it, falls off, breaks his arm. The neighbors come by again. Oh my God, if you didn't find that horse, and your son wouldn't have fell off and broke his arm. He goes, we'll see. Next, the cavalry comes in, and they start recruiting children and people to go to war. And then they couldn't draft his son, for lack of better terms, because he had a broken arm. The neighbors go, oh my God, if you didn't find that stallion, he didn't fall off his horse, which seemed like a bad thing. And then they come that your son will be at war right now. And he goes, we'll see. And it's just kind of the lesson that what may be your worst event could be your best event. What could be it just kind of, it's in ebbs and flows, and kind of important, just like we'll see and take it as it comes. And yeah, it's kind of, you could look at the flip side of something really good could be bad. Okay, but something really bad could be good if we just give it things a little bit of time. And it's not to line it up with the ode that time heals. I'm not sure if I believe in that. I just believe time can alleviate. I think it depends what we do at this time. But this notion of, we have to give it a little bit of time, because in the moment things are terrible and we just don't know how it's going to play out. And that's part of the belief process I think we're talking about. But I love that little story of the Chinese farmer, because it just kind of keeps you right here. And yeah, you want to be grateful and this or that, but at the same time, we don't know how it's going to work out. What we feel right now is not going to be forever, because nothing is forever.
That's right.
And it's just, we have this choice to see, again, it comes back to how we see it. Like that Chinese farmer saw it that way and everyone else saw it this other way. And they were both seeing life from two different lenses and going through completely different things because of how we see it. And I just believe in the power of how we see things. It doesn't have to be a blink of an eye, but just like going to the gym, you do repetitions, you practice with it. It becomes a daily practice. Next thing you know, you see life totally different, and we're able to navigate these things a little bit better, even though it doesn't remove the pain, but we can navigate the pain with better management.
I agree with you.
I don't know why did we bring that up? Is that making
I'm not
sense?
sure we got there, but it was beautiful. It's a beautiful story.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah,
Everyone Google and fact check that story, by the way. But that's how I came to understand it.
But I think it's true. I think it's true that life is understood backwards, and
yes,
and that I forgot who said this. This is another writer. This one I can't quote directly, but I know it's in there somewhere. But he says that life is an unfair teacher. It gives you the exam first and then the lesson, and it's just true. But ultimately, the reality is that we can't escape suffering, and I think that's what the Chinese farmer is saying too. When he's saying we'll see, because at the end of the day, something bad will happen. No one is going to go through life unscathed. Suffering is just a part of being here. And what separates us, what separates us from each other, is how we handle that suffering. We look around and we see somebody who is happy and satisfied and content and kind and just has, that joyous disposition. And it's easy to assume, oh, their life must be perfect. That's why they're this way. And of course, that's just that we know that we know rationally and logically that that's impossible. Even that person who's so happy-go-lucky and so at peace has certainly suffered. Perhaps even suffered subjectively worse things than you. But it's like you mentioned, and like I think we've been echoing from these other writers too, it's a matter of perspective. Two people can look at the same situation in completely different ways and come out of it differently as well. So what does that teach us? I mean, it teaches us that that the work is ours. that there's an inner work that needs to be done with how we face the inevitable parts of life, many of which are difficult and terrible and bring suffering. But how we come out of that is, in large part, a choice, a perspective, um, and it's in our hands. It's not something out of our control.
Yeah, and there's so much that is out of our control, and I wonder, because I always contemplate these questions. I meet some of the most incredible people I meet have gone through incredible challenges and
Exactly.
adversity,
Yeah.
but then there's plenty of people that have gone through plenty of challenges and adversity, and they're miserable people
Yeah.
visibly and just being in their company. And again, it's not judging it; it's just an observation. I always wonder how come. What is it that some people are able to do this, do that, and you could say genes, experience, nature versus nurture. I think it's all that. But again, it keeps coming back to the idea of how that person perceived, gave meaning to their experience. Now another person gave meaning to their experience, and that's the only to date answer that I could come up with is how they perceived it. And like a very silly story that I've mentioned before on some other shows. This might not be the perfect example, but my two of my nephews, there's a story that one was the older one, like a year and a half apart, again, raised in the same family, same household. There was thunder, and one was terrified of the thunder, and the other
Mhm.
one was fascinated by it. And it's very simple as this comparison is like, okay, they came from the same family, same upbringing, same house, but one was terrified of the thunder, one was fascinated. Like, why? And I kind of extrapolate that into why and how some people navigate certain things differently. I'm not even saying better, but they're able to manage it. And it keeps coming back to how they shift a mindset, or why maybe an accident. Like I don't think a 8-year-old and a 10-year-old are really working on themselves inwardly to decipher either on purpose, but maybe something happening along the way. And I always just ask these questions: instead of being like, okay, so and so is handling this better than me, that's unfair, or why not ask, what are they doing differently that
Yeah.
maybe I can do? And to me, it still comes back to the same thing I've said 45 times in this episode: is they just made a decision, they made a choice to perceive it one way through lessons and experience and examining. And it's not to say that it can happen at a blink of an eye, but I just do believe we have that choice. And I think it scares people to think we have a choice because no, that happened to me. This is an external. Yeah, you can't control that. I understand that, but we do have that one choice. Like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning is that thought
Mhm.
of what meaning are you giving it, and that is how we create or get through anything in life. And I don't
Yeah.
know any other way to doing it other than making that choice. And the choice is scary because then it puts the onus on you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That choice
True.
gives you the
Yeah.
accountability, which is
Exactly. It
scary.
makes you responsible. It places responsibility on your shoulders for your life, and I agree that we are responsible for our lives. I mean, I certainly think that we all come into the world a certain way, but we also have free will, and the way we live is 100% a product of our choices, and even how we suffer, when we suffer, is in our control. But people have to take that accountability and that responsibility. And I think it's easier. I think it's easier to victimize yourself,
Yes.
um, as seemingly crass and unfeeling that may sound. Um, it takes a tremendous amount of courage, and strength and introspection to say, I'm going to take control of my life. I'm going to take control of my grief. I'm going to find the meaning in this that will make it worthwhile. That will transform an event, an external event that is horrific and traumatic and sad, and I'll find a way, because I choose to extract some wisdom from it, extract some growth from it, extract some lessons from it, rather than just letting it destroy you. And again, I think we're both saying the same thing, which is that we don't judge people or criticize people that are suffering and struggling in that suffering. Um, Even I'm sure both of us have probably failed
Oh yeah.
to do what we're saying should be done.
Absolutely.
But um, I think that the attempt is what matters. I think that if you are making a real attempt, a real effort to find purpose and meaning in the suffering, then that is already a reward unto itself, rather than just living life mindlessly. And, there's another line that I love that says it's very dangerous to live life seriously. There's a danger in being a serious person, like because you're going to face head on the parts of life that are ugly. You're not just going to put blinders on and say, well, I can't do it. It's not my fault. I'm powerless. I have no choice. And you say, no, I can make choices that will direct my life in a certain direction, even if that process is painful. I'm going to look into the abyss. I'm going to look into the abyss rather than evade it. And I think it's necessary to go back to what we mentioned at the very beginning. I think it's necessary to do that if we're going to say that we lived a life that was worth something. The unexamined life is not worth living.
Yeah, and
said the ancient Greeks. So
you're saying things that you're capping off, bookending what you're saying before I even get a chance to say it, because I couldn't agree more. In the attempt, and it kind of brings you back to that analogy you mentioned about pushing up the stone, and maybe it's all meaningless, but you can try to find meaning in what seemingly is meaningless, and it's whether you find that big meaning. I think you find micro meanings that may add up to one big meaning. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it is in the attempt, and it is in the seeking, it is in the journey that I think is really where it is. Like, regardless if we find this big meaning, it's really in the attempt, because in that attempt, you're essentially focusing on meaning, which is a positive meaning, hopefully. And with that attention, you're creating a more intentional, positive life just by trying. Like, simply by trying. And I think it's, again, you mentioned it's much easier to be in the victim mentality. It's much easier to sit in the pain because there is an odd comfort to the pain. There is an odd comfort. It's way more effort, much easier said than done to attempt to work your way out of it. And not that you're ever out of it, because it's part of, you kind of live with it. But again, it's in that journey. And I think it was Earl Nightingale has nothing to do with grief, but he was trying to define success. And he said something along the lines of, this isn't me trying to go tit for tat for your quotes, because I can't keep up.
No, I love the quotes. Give me all the quotes.
But it was something along the lines of, success is a progressive and worthy realization towards a specific goal. Meaning, it wasn't exactly the success at the end. Everyone thinks, oh, I made it, and then they still feel empty inside. It's the progressive realization towards the goal.
Yeah,
that's success. And it was the progress to get to some kind of bookend that we think we may get to, and we find out that's not even the meaning. Like, there was a I can't remember forgetting his name. Who's a big time Scotty Scheffler. Scotty Scheffler's one of the best golfers in the world right now, and there was some interview he got a lot of slack for, because they were asking about the success of, he just won this big tournament. I don't know which one it was, and he goes on this philosophical existential rant about, it's just, I work all my life and I'm very grateful to have won this tournament, but I win, I get the celebration on the green, and then the next question is, well, are you excited to win your next tournament? And it's like, okay, I think I reached the pinnacle, but I still feel like a little bit of empty inside. And I may be misquoting or misparaphrasing him, but there was a lesson in that it wasn't, we think we have this end all and be all, but it was really the journey to get there that really matters, even through the pain. And the journey was way more painful than the success at the top. But I think that's what grief is. I think it's this painful dread of persevering and, yes, just trying to find the lessons. Whether you find it or not, we do find these micro lessons along the way if we just open our heart a little bit to trying to find that. Keep the door open instead of just saying, no, this sucks, this, that, and the other, which is part of the process too. We got to go through that. We got to be there, whether it's years or for most of our life. Yeah, that's part of the process too. But it's this idea that it's that corny-ass quote of, the journey is all that matters. It really is the fucking journey. And I'm learning that at this point in my life. It's, the little things that I think I don't want to do to get where I think I want to be, but it's really the attempt to get there that is where the real meaning is.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it sucks, but it's awesome.
Yeah.
But it's awesome.
It's that's all there is. I mean, that's the reality. The reality is that you don't get there. The reality is that you keep on pushing that stone up the hill. You win the tournament, and it's on to the next one. and nothing lasts forever, and everything is deteriorating, and everything is decomposing as we go. Because if you just submit yourself to the dread of all this, then you'll never do anything. And for instance, like I don't particularly work out, right? But so people that actually work out, well, one would say, well, what's the point? Your body's going to die. Your muscle mass is deteriorating every year. You're going to get old and frail, and it'll be over. So, what is the point of doing anything if if the end is coming? So even if we don't realize it, even if we're not quoting Camus or spending our days philosophizing on this, even if we don't realize it, every single day that we do anything, we are rebelling against the notion that life is meaningless. We are rebelling against the notion that death is final and inescapable and should do nothing but torment our every waking moment, and we should just be suffering and grieving all day long because we lose and lose and lose over and over again as we go. And yet here we all still are, putting one foot in front of the other and trying to meet people and trying to succeed and working out and traveling and eating and I think what irrespective of how much you are grieving, you eventually have another meal. And sometimes when you're really really suffering and grieving, you lose your appetite, literally. You can't eat. And but I have never met a person who starved to death after they lost something, which means that inevitably there's something in our human spirit that is determined to go forward.
Mm-hmm.
And
I believe that.
And it seems to be so meaningless and so nonsensical and so ridiculous and absurd that we would strive to do anything ever if we're all just going to die. And so I think that it's clear that all of us have faith, even if we don't know it. Um, no one goes around just accepting their fate, really. I don't think anybody walks across the street without looking both ways, just because, oh, I don't care. I don't care about anything. But you still are eating and looking both ways when you cross the street. And I'm using those examples just to say that there's a survival instinct that, in my mind anyway, suggests that we all understand there's something more important than the body. Otherwise, we would all say, well, if it's all meaningless and we're all dying and nothing matters, I'm just going to lay here and die. But we don't do that, do we? We all want more out of life. And I think that really is what gets people past loss, right? You lose a relationship. You could say, well, I'm never going to date a person ever again. And many of us have probably said that. And then what happens? Time goes by. And after you've suffered greatly, you end up dating somebody. People are married for 50 years and get divorced, or someone passes away. And now it's become very common for people to date again even after that. So why would we do that if nothing matters and death is crushing and grief is insurmountable? I think it's because at the end of the day, our love for life is stronger than our dread of death.
Yeah, there's something like an invisible tug there, like you said. Even if people, because I've seen it in the comments section, it breaks my heart when people say, "I don't want to be here anymore." Um, that it's been 40 years, life's not the same, and everything's miserable. And I feel that breaks my heart when I see that. And at the same time, maybe to what point you're saying is, but they're still here to comment. They're still hanging
Yeah,
on, and maybe if they might have that perspective, but maybe there is this invisible tug to stay alive. Like how many stories in history when something adrenaline kicks in, and everyone immediately instinctually wants to
yeah,
survive. Like that's what they most people go for instinctually. So I just think there is this idea that maybe there is that invisible tug that everyone has the ability to tap into, and most people I think eventually tap into that, even if they don't think they will. But maybe that is the sign, the partial evidence of spirit. And
yeah,
part of kind of what we're talking about, we continue on, we want to stay alive. And at the end of the day, it's simply stated as it is. I just want to make the best of it. I don't know what else to do. Like you
yeah,
could go on vacation and it rains all week and the vacation sucks. You can sit there and just cry the whole time. You're like, let's just make the best of it. Let's go play bingo. Like I don't want to play bingo. I want to be on the beach, but let's
yeah,
just play bingo. It's the only option we have.
yeah,
And that is a choice that we make. Because I met so many, like even when my travels, it's one specific story. I went to Cambodia by myself. I was I hired the driver for like $12 a day. I couldn't believe it was that price. And he's explaining, I was like, let's go get lunch. I'll buy you lunch. We sat on the side of the road eating with our hands. And this guy was making, I think he was something like $3 to $5 a day working in the fields. And he was, at least from, I don't
mm,
know what his details of, if we go in depth, but he was like, wasn't complaining. And who knows how much of it's ignorance of not knowing what the West has, this, that, and the other. But he was happy. He was aware how much he was making, the life he was living as he explained it to me. But the only thing I could think of was like, what is going on in his head and his heart and his soul that is just, to me, from my privilege that I have in the life that I've been able to live, like that seems very difficult. Like a couple bucks a day and not having this Xbox or whatever bullshit that I have in front
yeah,
of me. And this dude is just still able to find this contentment and joyfulness in certain moments. Like what it always makes me go, okay, what is he doing? I don't have
mm,
an answer. I have thoughts that we already talked about, but there's just something there. And I just truly believe in the human spirit, which I think you're saying that we all have that ability to tap into. I think it's just smothered by this digital age that we're living in of just distractions and too much information when all we have to do is really just look deep inside. And I truly believe that line that it's all in
yeah,
us. And we have the power to persevere through so much unbelievable shit than the people I've had on this show that have gone through way worse things than I, at least on paper, and they're still able to see life with this beauty. And when I see
yeah,
more and more people doing it and I see people that don't do it, I still believe those people that don't do it can do it. And it's like, I just hope these conversations and these perspectives that you and me are sharing and other people are sharing on the show just open that up within that person. Because at the end of the day, we could force feed. I could like, I believe in, but until they believe in themselves, nothing's going to happen.
yeah,
So it's an awakening within that we have to have this blind faith sometimes to just understand that we can do that.
yeah. No, it's a personal experience. Everyone has to undergo, their own initiation, so to speak. You can't, you can't pass this on to someone else. You can't transfer it. It's untranslatable. It's something that you have to um, reveal to yourself. It's something that you have to. It's a discovery, an epiphany that you have to experience on your own. But we're all capable of it. There's nothing. There's nothing inherently special about that man. Um, it's not that he came into the world with this talent or this gift of contentment and living in the moment. These are things that we can attain if we strive towards it. It requires the desire to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's why it's necessary to have these conversations and to examine yourself um, rather than just living life blindly and not really paying attention to the things that matter, like death. And that's why having these conversations on death, I think, are so significant because it's one of the, if not the fastest way to be reminded of the importance of examining your life and taking control of your life and living it to the fullest and finding meaning in it. All the things that we've been discussing for the last hour or so. Uh, Death is certainly the mechanism that drives you to that place the fastest. And that's why it is such an opportunity. That's why grief and loss is such an opportunity, because in those moments is when you're propelled. maybe you're just if you're just living your life and everything is going well, more likely than not, you're probably not going to find much meaning, because you're so placated and you're so just satisfied in this dull, mindless satisfaction. But grief is such a tremendous opportunity to be awakened to the reality of your existence and how precious it is. Um, so that's how I see grief and death and loss, as it's such a catalyst towards being a more complete human being.
Yeah.
That I think is the whole purpose of being here. Because if you're just going to be here and eat and sleep and live and die and not come to uh, any kind of meaningful revelation and experience, then you've missed a chance at the greatest gift that we all have, which is to experience life one time.
And I think, as bullshit of an answer and thought of this can come off as like, I think that's why we're here, and like the suffering and the things that we, as a human meat sack brain, would say, I don't want to be here to suffer. And I think that journey of figuring that out is why we're here. I have had a lot of interesting, I almost said strange, what used to be strange for me, conversations about the afterlife, the near-death experiences, and my mom's own personal near-death experience, and just opening my mind to these different thoughts and beliefs and just see what sticks. But I truly feel like after this is all over, it's just going to be, we're going to be looking down, or wherever we're going to be, in a totally different perspective, not an egotistical human brain. Like, oh, I truly feel like there's gonna be a day where like, oh, now it makes sense. And we're just gonna look down at us like little monkeys, like, oh, you poor suffering little thing. But you're gonna find out one day, we're in this ethereal world that it's just, there was a purpose. There is reason behind this. I'm not saying reason in this like religious tonality, but again, I mean, I could find out I'm all wrong. Like Bill Burr said, like, yeah, you can worry about things, or just worry about it when you got to worry about it. And if the day comes where I find out it was all meaningless and this or that, or it's nothingness, and I'm not even going to be around to even contemplate that. But in the meantime, I just don't want to take it all too seriously. Like you mentioned, I think what Alan Watts said is something like, we take too seriously what the gods made for fun. Who said there's fun in grief and all this? It's not fun, but I just think it's the human experience. Unless it's at least, I see it like that. It's like, okay, what am I going to do with it now? Like playing poker. I got this hand. Yeah, I could just fold him and sign up and never win a hand, or let's fucking play him. Let's see what happens. And I think it's a blend of being gentle. I think it's a blend of being a warrior and competitive in life. And what you said, it is like a little bit of rebellion. Like life is throwing me this. I was like, I'm gonna throw a middle finger up. And I'm gonna have this life and death. I'm gonna make the most of it and try to find some meaning and try to have some fun while I'm here.
Yeah.
And granted, I am in a position with blessings in my life that a lot of people don't have, and that helps me humbleize what I'm going through. But then it's like, okay, those people that really are in dire situation, how do they look at it? It's much easier for me to say that. But I've seen so many people in certain situations that do look at it in a similar way that is inspiring to me. So it's possible. And I just want to open my eyes to this limitless possibilities and not close the door on anything, because I don't know what's to come. But in the meantime, I'm gonna try to rock on as best I can. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, I don't think we have another choice. I don't think we have another option. I mean, like, despite all my beliefs and my faith and and all the help that I need with my unbelief, um, I I'll be the first person to acknowledge, which might in some ways sound like an unchristian acknowledgement. Um, I'm so afraid of death. I, I can think about heaven all day long, and try to put all my faith in what's next. Um, but I just want to be here. Like I love the earth. So, and that sounds potentially unchristian, but I don't think it is either. I think that what's funny is that there's a misconception, I think, that Christians are obsessed with the afterlife, and then we just want to die and get to heaven, and then our earthly life doesn't matter. Well, I find that to be a contradiction of the faith, because what happens in this life dictates where you go next. So if this life was so insignificant in God's eyes, why would it be the entire deciding factor of how you spend
Yeah.
eternity?
Huh.
And so I think that we are meant to live this life well, to self-actualize, to find meaning, find purpose, to love one another, to care for each other, to do our best, and to be here, to really be here, to really cherish this life. So, yeah, I have a very healthy fear of death, which I every time I think about it, I'm terrified. Like I don't want this life to end.
Well, I'm glad you came on the podcast to talk about death.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Despite your fear.
Well, you know what? I've always been so keenly aware of my mortality ever since I was a little kid. Almost to the point of excess, I would think. I don't think it's normal. So my friend Paul that I grew up with in Jersey City.
Cautious of Paul.
Let me tell you about Paul. We were in high school. We were 16 years old. And so I guess maybe it was like 2004, right? And Michael Jordan hit the shot in the finals against the Jazz where he left the hand in the air in 1998. So about, I guess, 6 years had passed. And me and Paul will be hanging out at lunch. We're teenagers. And would be like, all right, so between now and when Jordan hit that shot was 6 years. So we got like 10 more of those tops. But even within that, we only got like 5 more that really count. Because once you're like 40, 50, like, what are you doing anyway? And so we were so obsessively aware of our mortality at like 15, 16 years old, where we were already counting down the days, like how many meaningful years we got left. We got like 2 Jordans left in us. We got 2 Jordan shots left in us. That's how we were quantifying time.
That's hilarious.
Because the point of what we were saying was like, do you remember how vividly you remember that? Like, do you remember how vividly you remember that shot? And you can use this example now with everything else in life. Maybe you weren't around for that if you're a little younger. Or maybe you're older than that, you remember something else more vividly. But the point is that take any memory of your life, and this is where it gets scary.
Yeah, I'm already scared. Actually.
Take a memory, and it's like, okay, how many years have passed since that memory? Let's say it's 20, right? Okay, I got like 1 more of those before I'm 60. Like, life goes by in the blink of an eye.
Faster and faster.
And that to me is horrifying, because I love being here. But the only way you can really combat that is you have to transform that fear into a mad love for your life.
Mm-hmm. Love that.
And that's the best you can do. And along the way, of course, you try to do the best you can with those around you. I think it's important to do unto others as you want others to do unto you. I think that's also one of the purposes of life is to care for one another, to love one. In fact, the revolutionary moment of Christianity, of the teachings of Jesus, is when he says there's 2 commandments: love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And if you do those 2 things, you fulfill everything else. Because in fact, if you love God and you love your neighbor, you're not going to rob, you're not going to steal, you're not going to lie, you're not going to cheat, you're not going to kill. So, of course, we do those things because we are human and we falter and we go astray and inevitably we fail. But if we simply love God and love each other, that would be sufficient to fulfill all the laws of the universe. And I think that that's what we're here to do, or to strive to do. And that, in the face of death, is a life well lived, a life in which you loved God and you loved each other. That's a life well lived. And in fact, again, and I think this does relate to death, because even this story that I'm going to tell, just to complete this thought, Jesus also says this that I think is so interesting. Um, he gives this parable, this idea that someday when we all get up there, in the judgment day, so to speak, there's going to be a moment where uh, people will say, "But God, we did this, and we prayed, and we read the Bible, and we went to church. How, it let us into heaven?" And Jesus says, "Did you feed the sick? No. Did you? I'm sorry. Did you feed the hungry? Did you clothe the naked?" And and Jesus says, if you do these things to the least of your brethren, it's like you're doing it for me. And it just again shows um, that, at least from the Christian perspective, that the purpose of life is to love, to love others, to do unto others as you want others to do unto you. And I think in the face of death, that is what should inspire us to. Sometimes people criticize that perspective and say, "Oh, well, people just do good just because they're afraid of what's going to happen afterwards." Well, I don't know. I'm not here to judge people and what motivates them, but would that be so bad? If everybody was really good to each other because they were afraid of something, would that still not be better than people being evil to each other? So, so that argument doesn't really do much to me. But I think that certainly what we should aspire to is not just to be motivated by fear, but to have a genuine, real desire to do and to be good, whatever that means. And I think that what it most plainly means is to love one another.
I love that. And I'm not even, again, I was raised Christian, so I'm not very religious. I don't look to the Bible. So I'm going to reference exactly what you're saying to Kurt Vonnegut instead. So, spoiler alert, if you haven't read Sirens of Titans, but it's my favorite book, and I have something with the book tattooed on me for this one of those many reasons. But he said Kurt is more, from my understanding from his writing, doesn't really believes in more like the meaningless of life. From my understanding, and
Yeah, he was an absurdist. They believe in the
abs-
absurdist, the surrealism and the absurdism of life.
yeah, and I love his
Yeah.
takes because I think he's hilarious. But there's the one meaning from that book. He goes, and I love how he says this. He says, "A purpose." Doesn't say the purpose. He goes, "A purpose of human life is to love whoever is around to be loved." And I think that's what I'm taking with you're
Yeah.
saying. It's to me, I like simplifying life is better, and I love the idea of what you're saying, just by the notion of regardless of people believe in God, love God and thy neighbor. That's the simplicity of that. The way everything else unfolds with just that main core of love,
Yeah.
everything else goes into the right place if you're leading by that foundation. And it takes a lot of the pressure off having to do a million things right. Because if you do remember that notion, then you'll trust to make the quote unquote right decision. You'll
Yeah.
do this with your life. You do that just by simplifying that one notion. And I think that is so fucking beautiful.
Yeah.
Because at this point in my life, again, I'm trying to simplify, reduce, and try to I get so overwhelmed with all these things that are out there, these gurus online that are saying one thing: don't eat this, don't eat that, believe in this, grief is this, grief is that, like the Jets suck, whatever it is. And it's just like, but okay, we just try to find whatever we resonate with. Maybe it's not what we're saying. I resonate with that, to love whoever is around to be loved. And that you could really steel man that, like that person just, punch you in the face, you could love. There's different types of love I think you can give.
Yeah.
There's in love, I love my mom, I'm in love with this girl, but there's love that you can give to people around you just by the compassion and the way we live our life. And I love that idea of finding that simplicity. Like if you do this, what you're just explaining, everything else falls into place.
Yeah.
And we can persevere, we can live a better life. And the more we do that with another, everyone else lives a better life. And it's not gonna be perfect. There's plenty of bad shit in this world.
Yeah.
But again, it starts with how we navigate our own life in order to change anything. And I feel a little bit of anxiety right now talking about this, to be honest, which is a whole nother rabbit hole. But dude, this is exactly how I thought it might go with you. So I appreciate
Yeah.
you schooling us a little bit.
Nah, schooling. I was like, listen, I would end with this, because this is not, I didn't school nobody. I would end by saying all of this is easier said than done.
Always.
All this is the hardest thing in the world. What is funny, what is common, I guess, God has a sense of humor. What's funny about that simple instruction is that it's the hardest thing to do.
Yep.
It's the hardest thing to do. I mean, no one gets that right, but and that's how we come back full circle. I think God wants us to try, and I think we should want to try, because the attempt is what matters. Because if your intention is genuine and you're really trying, you're gonna falter. But trying is really the whole purpose of being here. Just try your best. Put in your best effort. Death is waiting. I would love to end with Emily Dickinson, because I would not stop for death. Death kindly stopped for me. It's coming. It's coming. No one's stopping for death, but it's going to stop for you. And I say this to myself, let me try not to let that motivate too much fear in me, though, of course, I fear death. But hopefully we can just try our best to let death inspire us to live a life in service of others, a life of love. And that would be, I think, a life well lived.
Boom. I think we should end it on that note. For anyone that wants more information on David, I'll plug your audiobook in the links. For anyone wants to find that, just check in the show notes if you're watching on Spotify, Apple, wherever the hell you are, and your socials, so people can that don't know you, I'm sure a lot do, will be able to find you. So
cool.
I appreciate you, brother, the man. It's just so much fun.
Let's go Knicks.
Let's go Knicks. There's one last night. What's today? 22nd?
Yeah.
Yeah, he just beat the Heat's ass last night. I was at the game. Other than that, I love Madison Square Garden. That's my afterlife. And until next time, peace out.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Dead Talks. Please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell. That'll give you updates as to when we post a new video, more episodes, and more content in general. We are streaming on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and all that. And also find us on Instagram at Dead Talks Podcast or www.deadtalks.net. Thank you so much.